Today we're talking about one of the best exercises you can do at home for back pain if you're moving on through that rehabilitation process to effectively work on reducing back pain from home. Today is going to be all about marching bridges. This is a great exercise that you can do early on in a back pain rehab program. It's going to help you build dynamic core stability in a safe and effective way at the right time in that rehab process. And we're also going to cover some tips to make sure that you're doing them correctly and make sure we steer you well clear of those all too common errors with this exercise. So let's get into it. And before we do, don't forget, you can always subscribe to the channel if you find these videos helpful, give us a thumbs up and consider sharing this with someone else that could use the content too. One of the reasons we thought we'd put these videos together is to help you guys understanding why there are lots of videos out there that show you this godly exercise that's absolutely fantastic, but it's good in set circumstances. And we're going to cover that with this particular exercise today. So do bear in mind, we're going to go through quite a lot of detail. Hopefully you're going to find it really, really helpful. And if you've got any questions as we go along, do please post those in the comments below. So what better way to start out than actually having the video playing just up here so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to be going through the marching bridge. Now the easy way to do this, we've got our core engaged nice and tight. I always say pop your hands on that waist so you can actually feel the core engaging. The trick with this one is our core should be holding our spine stable as we lift our bum gently off the floor and then switch from one leg to the other as we're going through our repetitions. That is how we do the marching bridge. When we finish, we simply slowly lower our bum back down to the ground, and that is the exercise done. Now let's get on to why and how this exercise is going to benefit you in this particular stage of rehabilitation. And I know this exercise actually looks remarkably easy, but you will be surprised, especially depending on what stage of recovery you're in. This one can often be a real challenge for people because they just don't have the stability or the control over the stability of that section of the lumbar spine. And that's when we can get in trouble. So let's watch further and see why and how we can get this exercise so terribly wrong. So let's use a spine to demonstrate what is happening here. As we're living on our back like so, we're providing stability for this section of the lumbar spine. Now, a lot of you guys, if you're watching this when we've injured our back, it's something going on down the bottom here, 4-5, 5S1, maybe it's the disc, maybe it's some degeneration, maybe it's the facet problems. And what should be happening when we lift our bum off the ground like so, we should be holding this completely steady. Now, what all too often happens is that we don't have the control. So when we start marching those legs, this is happening all over the shop and we're making things worse or we're aggravating the back. Now, firstly, why is this exercise so good? Well, it's very, very clear. When we're walking around out and about on a daily basis, if we don't have control for our core, then these sorts of wobbles take place and we injure ourselves. With this exercise here, you've got a fraction of the body weight on that spine. We're supported by the rib cage up here, we've got the feet down here. It's only really the pelvic region or the weight of the pelvic region that's actually in play here. So the core is learning to stabilize a very subtle movement of the feet, swapping from one leg to the other in a very, very gentle way. That's why it's a safe exercise. That's why we put this in that early stage of rehab. We can still get it wrong, and we'll talk about that more later on in this video. But understand that if you can't even lie on your back and gently lift our bum off the floor without losing the stability of this spine, how on earth do you have the competence to do anything upright? That's a really important one for you to bear in mind, and why this exercise needs to come at the right time in your rehab process. So after that little rant being out the way, understanding how to hold your core is really, really important. And we talk about this in Back in Shape phase 1. So if you're struggling to actually just learn how to engage your core for the very first time, this exercise is probably a little bit advanced. You should definitely head over to backinshapeprogram.com. There'll be a card up here or a link down here where you can learn more and get a grip with your core engagement first, because we can't engage the core, we can't really do anything effectively. So that's probably the best place to start. So this exercise is really safely teaching that core stability. It's teaching your body to be able to engage your core to protect the lumbar spine, because it's when we do this exercise wrong and our lumbar spine starts moving that we catch things. Maybe we catch a facet joint, we get a sharp jolt of pain. That's because we're not controlling the core, we're not controlling the stability in the spine. And it also teaches us to start using that core section with lower limb muscles. We've got those powerful glutes and hamstrings that are used to move us around on a daily basis and move those limbs. And it's teaching you to maintain stability in the face of changing forces coming from lower down the body. So it's a really, really important one to learn how to do. And because of the lower weight on the section of your lumbar spine, it's much, much safer. So back to the spine again. What's one of the big mistakes that people make when they do this? Now, if you're someone that's actually got a lot of discomfort in the lower back, maybe we've got sciatica, we've got a disc bulge or something like that, if you make these mistakes, you're going to feel the consequences a little bit more. Now, the reality is because it's a safe exercise, you're not actually doing that much objective damage. We're just creating a little bit of irritation of that area. Most of that's just going to be the way we change the pressure gradients in our spine that puts more pressure on certain areas, giving us a little bit of inflammatory buildup. But it's not a dangerous exercise. That being said, if we're doing it incorrectly, we're going to know about it, especially if we've got more severe injury. So we've got to get the technique right. One of the big mistakes that people make is they kick up too high with their back and they don't have the strength to do so, and all of a sudden their back arches. Now, if we've got any lower lumbar issues, we're talking about the L5-S1 region, which is right down here where the lumbar spine meets the sacrum. This is a very common area for injury. As we lose control and that arches too much at one point, it's going to pressurize these facet joints. When we arch too much in the spine, if I show you a bit higher up here, we close the holes that the nerves come out of. And if there's a little bit of inflammation in that area, and then we rapidly, doing the technique incorrectly, close that hole, it means that the inflammation is occupying a greater percentage of the area. Think about a sponge that's full of water. If we squeeze the sponge, all of a sudden the water displaces. Well, if it can't, because there's a hole here with bony margins, then it puts more pressure on the nerve as we lose our control, and that's when we get caught out. So mistake number one is not allowing ourselves to go too high. Don't go too high as you kick your bum off the ground. Then mistake number two kind of coincides with number one, and that is just losing control or not controlling the core properly. If we're not controlling our core effectively, as we come up or as we swap legs, we get this torsion occurring. Now, many of you guys, if you've had back pain in the past, you notice if you twist, if you bend, if you move funny in any direction, it catches you out. And that's where our core needs to come in, keep it engaged, and hold this spine steady. Make sure you really pay attention to that. Now, on this topic, you might be thinking, well, if I'm not very stable, I'm not very good at this, can't I just do straight bridges? Well, you can, but that's a very large motion that we're going through, up and down, up and down. What we're teaching you to do here with the marching bridges is come up and stabilize and hold, and then gently, as we're moving those legs, which I'll talk about in a moment, we're gently creating the need to do this, but we're holding it steady as we're moving one leg from the other, as opposed to doing these repetitively. How often on a daily basis are you just doing that repetitively? You're not. But what we are doing is small movements as we're walking about upright, just little torsions, little movements in the spine. And that's what we want to get you to control first, because if we can't control the basics, then doing these large power moves like squats, for example, or like the full bridge, they're not discrete enough, they're not focused enough just yet. And right now, this sort of exercise, phasing and the correct timing of these exercises in a rehab protocol is so, so important. Those other exercises generating power come a little bit later on, but this is really about control, and therefore the marching variation of the bridge is why we choose it now. So in alignment with that, we've just spoken about moving too much or gross movements. One of the final mistakes that people make on this, because this is an exercise that's done elsewhere, you'll have seen it in other rehab programs in different ways. But the final mistake is people moving the legs too far. We're focusing on the distribution of weight from one leg to the other. So just lifting your feet an inch off, just so the weight comes off that leg, is sufficient. We don't need to be bringing the leg all the way up to 90 degrees. That's not what this exercise is about. This exercise is about slowly changing your weight from one leg to the other and back again, whilst maintaining a neutral, controlled core without our spine moving. So don't worry about too much leg movement. So just coming towards the end of the video, we wanted to give you a specific step-by-step, how could you make this exercise a little bit better and break it down? Because we do know from experience that a lot of people find all sorts of exercises difficult, but sometimes they shy away from doing them, and that's a big mistake. This exercise, like all the other ones that we recommend in Back in Shape, they are sensible exercises, they are safe exercises, and if you struggle to do them, that is normally because we're not able to do the technique correctly. Never doing them again doesn't solve the problem. We need to work at it, and that's when breaking these exercises down even more can really help you get a handle on them and slowly ease into them. So that's the big takeaway from this video. If you struggle with it, it's because you can't control your core, not because this exercise isn't for you or your condition is too severe. We have too many people over the years in clinic and in exercise programs, seen them go through these processes with all sorts of conditions, some very, very, very serious conditions post-surgery and some lesser. And every single person will struggle to a different degree with different exercises, but the good thing about these sorts of exercises is they shine a spotlight on that area of your body that isn't functioning correctly and isn't able to. And the way we go through that to actually rehab our back is by approaching that head on and adjusting things slightly to make it a little bit easier. So this next tip is going to be along that line of thinking. What we need to do is focus on just small movements. Let's start by only bringing that bum up maybe a centimeter or an inch off the floor. Start with that to begin with, and then just those gentle movements of the feet. Maybe you do that for your reps to begin with. And then slowly over time, you're going to find that you can bring the bum up a little bit higher whilst maintaining stability of the core. We showed earlier with the spine that as we lift up, we can arch that back in an inappropriate way, which will give us pain. We'll start off with that very small movement, 1 centimeter, turn it into an inch, and then it's 3. And that way you'll be able to slowly over the course of a couple of days to a couple of weeks, build competence. Remember, a lot of this will be down to the mental technique and the mental control. Later on comes the power element of these things in your back rehab journey. So we've been through the exercise, we've been how to do it, how not to do it, and a little tip to make sure you can ease yourself into this exercise. But what's the most important thing? The most important thing with this is that we feed these exercises in at the right time. This is a great exercise early on in your rehab process to learn how to engage and control the spine in a very safe environment where we're not going to cause any trouble, even if we get it a little bit wrong. But doing this exercise for the long term is just a little bit silly. We're going to end up getting stuck doing the same thing. We don't have the progression with this particular exercise that's needed, and that's where a proper program comes in. You can learn more about the Back in Shape program and how we feed marching bridges into that program at the right time and when we drop it out in favor of other exercises which are going to continue that process of rehabilitation to really bulletproof your back for the long term. There'll be a card up here and a link down here where you can learn more at backinshapeprogram.com about how these exercises fit together to form a real solid Back in Shape program and rehabilitation exercise course that will really fix your back pain from home. So hopefully you found this episode on marching bridges really, really helpful. Hopefully you learned something new, and maybe this exercise is actually for you. Maybe you've tried it in the past and it hasn't worked. Let us know in the comments below how you found it. Maybe you've learned something from this video. Please do let us know what that is. And remember, you can always support the channel by sharing it with a friend or subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell so you know when we next release a video. We appreciate your support. It's how we continue to produce more and more great content like this for the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time in another video. If you want to learn more about the premium Back in Shape membership, there's going to be a video somewhere underneath here. And if you want to stay up to date or tune in to some of our more recent live streams and the Q&As at the end of those, then that's going to be down here. And remember, you can subscribe to the channel up here and hit the notification bell to make sure you know when we next go live so you can join us for our next live stream and Q&A.